time itself! So today I'm going to talk about time and time flow in games, and how time flow contributes to game feel, basically. And the reason I'm doing it now is I had a call with a guy who was trying to tune up his game. He had a basic demo made, but I think he had this sense that he needed to tune it up, and it wasn't obvious how. And my advice for this is to slow things right down, sometimes literally just slow the flow of time in the game, because when it comes to how your game feels, most of the action is actually taking place within a second. As players, we're used to thinking about games in terms of long-term goals and medium-term goals and kind of what you're doing, and you normally get lost in the moment and you don't kind of break it down into smaller sub-second increments at all. So I think part of the transition from thinking like a player to thinking like a game developer is learning to look within each second as well as just at the longer term stuff. Because like I say, it's the stuff that happens inside the second, kind of below conscious awareness, that really dictates how your game feels moment to moment, and that is probably the main factor in whether it's fun. And then the moment to moment stuff is kind of long term as well. Just because it happens inside a second doesn't mean it's not long-term. It's like that second is going to repeat over and over again for the whole game, so you better make sure it feels good. For instance, when it came to Super Space Galaxy's controls, I wanted to make sure the moment-to-moment experience of flying your ship felt good. And this is a weird collision of art and science, really. Like I say, there's almost no analytical way to say whether it feels good. You just use the force, you just think with your heart, and you press the buttons, and you see how you feel about whether it's good or not, and you try to put your finger on what might be wrong or what could be improved. And so I've got a bunch of things in the game, actually, about your ship's turning speed and how it accelerates. It accelerates faster in the direction it's pointing, and reversing goes at half speed, basically. There is also space friction in the game, which I understand is not realistic, but whatever. And there's a bunch of stuff about engine warm-up as well. I have a system where, as you tell the ship to thrust at a certain speed, the engine kind of increases its warmed-upness to match that. And look, I don't really even know. I discovered this as I went along, but the point is, you'd start with how it feels, you try to figure out what could be improved, and you tweak the variables until it feels good. And then you tweak the variables some more until it feels better. And I've done that with the bobbing up and down even as well. So this is a weird collision between using your heart and tweaking variables, quite often doubling them and halving them and refining them until they feel right. Like I say, issues of this sort tend to show up as feelings first, and I think a lot of people get stuck there. Like, they're just stuck with this nagging feeling that something's wrong, and it's hard to pursue it. And if you're too rationalistic about this, if you mistrust your own feelings, you're kind of going to be tempted to just say, oh, whatever, that's just a feeling, what good is that? Well, my advice there would be to, if you do have a funny feeling that something is wrong, feelings don't tend to explain themselves, they happen at the level under conscious awareness, but dive into them, right? Figure out when you feel weird and when something feels wrong, and just go into it, and the explicit stuff will make itself known. Another, dare I say, fallacy here might be that, given that you don't consciously notice something, you don't notice something at all. So, I've been a game tester and tried to get smaller bugs fixed, and yeah, quite often what you get is this resistance of, oh, well, only weirdos will notice that. That's something that only happens to one frame or something. Some glitch appears for a single frame and then goes away. Nobody will notice because you have to slow the video down and freeze frame to see the glitch. And I've still get resistance and that kind of thing. But the thing is, it doesn't really matter if you see it explicitly, you still get the funny feeling. I mean, obviously, you can always tell me it's not important enough to fix, and I'm all of that. That's not it. But I've even had people tell me that glitches that happen for a frame aren't real, even when they're confronted with the freeze frame of it absolutely existing. So I think people can get a bit weird about this world that exists inside a second, too fast for conscious awareness, but slow enough that some part of you still notices. It's kind of a scary thought that there's this, I don't know, microscopic world almost flicking past you, and you might not notice it.
You might not have even noticed. But your brain did.
In fact, I'll fess up to one of my own bugs like this. I think I've still got a situation where when buttons are created, the middle of them is created first, and then you see the sides of the button come in a frame later, and the game happens at 60 FPS, so like I say, you hardly notice it, but boy, I sure wince quite often when this happens. I'm gonna have to find a way to fix it. And I've fixed a ton of bugs like this, like there's loads of bugs where I had to get a video and freeze frame and even show myself what it was. Because before I showed a freeze frame of a bug where when enemies died their colour changing effect appeared on top of too many things for a frame and then it's gone the next frame, and yeah, I've fixed plenty of stuff like that. And it really does add up to something. Like I say, it's tempting to think no one's gonna notice, it's not real, it's fine, but ultimately I see people play the game and they think that it's really well polished and really slick. So even if they don't know quite what that is analytically, they feel it. I also want to mention a great video I saw that I felt really vindicated by. This video the Game Grumps did years ago about Sonic Boom, and the editor Barry just goes over all these weird little glitches that happen every time the camera changes in the cinematics in Sonic Boom. And it's so weird because I thought, well, weren't those pre-rendered anyway? But anyhow, so if you want to see a decent breakdown of how it can feel really uneasy watching a cinematic when it's full of these little glitches, particularly if there's little frame glitches multiple times in a row, just don't even listen to me, just go listen to Barry break down Sonic Boom. And yeah, the comments here kind of prove my point as well. I'm just looking at a comment here saying, watching this opening cutscene as an average gamer, you just feel like something is wrong. You can't tell precisely what it is, but you can feel it. And that's kind of my point, I guess. That is the message of this whole darn video. So, I know I'm conflating the game feel and also kind of these frame glitches. I think they just all contribute to how the game feels, basically. So, what's my solution to all this? Well, I do have time-slowing tools I made sure to give myself. I use a homemade physics engine in ClickTeam Fusion. I do have a tutorial about how to make such a thing yourself if you want to use ClickTeam Fusion to make your physics engine thing. And it does include a way to make time-slowing effects as well. So in Super Space Galaxy, I can just hold down the T button anytime, and it goes into slow motion, and I've even got a slow motion mode for myself that I used to get the clip at the beginning of this video and all that stuff. Watching your own game in slow motion helps you kind of see what things really look like. There's a few kinds of things that are going to escape this kind of time-slowing stuff, but if most things depend on the flow of time, you can really watch your game quite carefully and make sure if it looks beautiful, slow as well as fast, and if things are jerking around, you may catch them better that way. I have also got an ability to pause the game. I call it hold. It's not quite a pause because there's no pause menu, but you can hold the game and then go forward one frame at a time. I don't know, that's just helpful too. So as a game designer, I think you've really got to scrutinize your game in a way that players don't consciously do it, but you will have to dig in and get analytical about things that they will only have vague feelings of.
I have witnessed events so tiny and so fast, they can hardly be said to have occurred at all.
If you're a good game designer, you'll hopefully have a sense of how to generate good game feel anyway. Like, I know I spent quite a while in Devil May Cry 3 and 4 at least, just playing around with Dante's moves and playing around with the timing on his sword combos and all that kind of thing, just because partly I wanted to understand it, I guess, as well. That's what I've done for a lot of my history. I didn't just play the games, I tried to break them down. So if you want to learn how to generate good game feel, you'll probably have to do the same kind of thing with the games you like playing. The nice thing about programming, at least, is that it does kind of force you to think in terms of what happens within each programming cycle and stuff. You're already kind of thinking in less time-based terms if you're a programmer, because you have this list of what happens and, you know, gets executed 60 times a second or whatever. So hopefully if you're used to programming things, you're already used to arranging things in this kind of timeless structure and then seeing it work itself out in time. So yeah, in conclusion, game feel is important. I think a lot of people get stuck wondering how to improve it, but just study your favourite games, study the timings on them. Most of the action is going to happen within a second, and don't ignore stuff that happens within a second, because that really is the difference between a game that kind of works on paper, and a game that's actually fun to play moment to moment. Most indie game devs never finish their game. Why? No structure, no accountability, and no support. That's why I'm opening 5 private coaching spots to help devs get unstuck and finally finish their game. Message me game plan in my Discord and let's chat.